start this. And we are live. The webinar is now live. And what do we have for attendees? Yeah, we've got a couple of people coming in. Excellent, excellent. I'm liking this. I think we should wait, 2 or 3 minutes before we get started. I'd like to take the opportunity to welcome everyone as they start to come in into this budget forum, Budget 101. We're going to try to explain the basics of a budget, how a municipal budget's formed, and we'll be answering any questions that we have that you people might have. Right now, we've got 14 attendees.
Good.
I'd like to see more, but I'm happy with that. If you're watching this, you'll myself, Finance Director Lisa Mills, Council President Dr. Ann Dixon, and Council Vice President Ms. Jen Ludwig are in attendance, and we will be doing this presentation. The lead on this is going to be obviously Ms. Lisa Mills, our Finance Director, and she loves public speaking, so we're we're going to get us some practice here today. This is going to be a very free flow meeting. This isn't an official meeting, it is a forum. So if you've got questions after we begin the presentation, just raise your hand and we will bring you in to ask those questions. But we're going to try and let Lisa do the presentation first, and then we'll go and start the question and answer phase of it. So if everybody is ready, I'm noticing we've got 14 people. Hillary Lima is on, soon to be council person. Good to have you join us, Hillary. All right, Lisa, the floor is yours. You've already got the ability to share, so you can share your screen, and you can begin anytime you're ready.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Okay. So we're just going to go into the municipal budget basics. All right. So, whoops. We're going to discuss the definition of a budget, purpose, process, categories, elements, revenue, expenditure, and a brief summary at the end. Budget definition. A budget is a written financial plan expressed in dollars that includes both revenues and expenditures and covers a specific period of time. An outline, another definition would be an outline of policies, priorities, and goals of elected town council members and their needs to achieve them. A budget is also defined as a set of spending limits on programs and services the town will offer. So we're going to go into the purpose. The purpose of the budget serves as a financial plan for the town, reflects the priorities and goals of the town council, establishes fund levels for town services, is governed by state and local laws, and it also is used as a tool to control, and it ensures managers do not overspend or do not undertake expenditures that have not been authorized. It also is used as a management tool for comparative purposes to determine the efficiency and effectiveness of a particular department. Process. The budgeting process is an annual cycle in which the town prepares revenue and estimates and a spending plan. Each department submits their needs to the town manager and finance director. The finance director compiles all information and summarizes the information in accordance with the law. Further, the process, the town manager and finance director review the needs of the town with the budget requests. The town manager submits the proposed budget request to the town council for review. During the budget hearings, the town council reviews and may suggest changes. The town manager then submits the town budget to the financial town meeting for a vote. Budget categories. Current operating budget includes expenditures for goods and services, which will be used within 1 year. And a capital expenditure is expenditures on equipment and infrastructure expected to last greater than a year. Some of the budget elements: revenue, money received for taxes and services and other fees, expenses, money paid for things. This includes regular monthly expenses and occasional seasonal expenses. And debts are money that we owe and we need to repay, including money we borrowed as credit. So these are the types of revenues that the town of Coventry receives: property taxes for real, tangible, and motor vehicle, fees and other charges, licenses and permits, state aid, and investment income. Expenditures for operation, financing, schools, assets and infrastructure, and reserves. And reserves are just generally, I guess as the name implies, reserving for basically contingencies and capital, and sometimes saving towards a future large capital purchase. I've seen reserves that we have budgeted like 30. In the past place I worked, we reserved a certain amount. I think it was 30,000 a year for a particular purchase of a boat, because we were on the island. But all right, budget basic summary, usually broken down in these categories: general government, public safety, public works, health and human services, recreation, conservation and development, education, capital outlay, and debt services. Budget summary. Local governments are required to adopt balanced budgets by allocating resources in conformity with policies and fiscal targets. Budget ensures spending follows a plan and supports government objectives. Meeting the objectives requires budget preparation based on several concepts, recognize accountability. And basically that means your budget is in accordance with the certain laws. The town uses current and prior. In our process, we use current and prior year financials and budgets, state aid information, service contracts, union contracts, contracts with copiers, all kinds of different contracts, information on current revenue and expenditures, debt service, which is, bond debt, capital leases, collective bargaining agreements, and a multi-year capital budget plan in developing an operating budget that is responsible. The finance department compiles each department's budget by talking to the department heads and determining their future needs. Any questions? I went right through that fast. Yes? Oh yeah, a lot of questions already.
Ms. Mills, thank you so much for that presentation. And I'm glad that we're going to be able to record this and also have that PowerPoint presentation available. Many times we use the terms tax levy and tax rate. Could you distinguish for the voters and all the members of the community, what do those terms mean?
Okay, well, a tax levy, it might be beneficial if I pull up something, if you can give me a minute. And the tax rate is typically a rate on the levy per 1,000. Would you like me to bring up a spreadsheet that shows that?
Certainly.
Okay, so it'll break it down between, let's see. So this will show the beginning. So I'm gonna, yes. So Ed, I just drag it over to my regular screen, correct? How do I share that? This new worksheet. Hold on, I got it. I think I got it. Hold on. Screen one. All right. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Yes.
With the different colors, property tax assessed?
Yes.
Okay. So this is going to be part of the current budget, and what I tried to do is summarize how, because this is really important for taxpayers to understand and everyone in general, how we get from an assessed value down to the actual levy. And so if you look across, I've broken out these years. So if we just look at last year's, the 2020, and for FY21 budget purposes, tax rolls are based on December year end. So in this one example, we have a net excess value of 2.6 billion, okay? And the tax rate for that is 18,968. And to get to the levy is what your question was, it's that tax assessed value, which is sometimes referred to as NAV, divided by the 1,000, because it's a rate per 1,000 times the actual rate. And that's how we get 49 million in a tax levy for residential real property. So if you look below, the way this town is unique, we have a piece of our taxes that are residential and they're frozen. So if we go down below, we see that 637, and then less the exemptions, we have 594 million that the net assessed value is taxed at a lower rate, as you can see, because that is frozen. So that's at a 15.166 rate to give us a tax levy of 9 million. So the net assessed value is our value based on all those, basically a company goes out and values one's property, and that information is compiled and the exemptions are subtracted to get the net assessed value, or what is taxable, and then you divide it by 1,000 and times it by the applicable rate. And as you can see, go down a little further, we have commercial real property that is taxed at a little bit higher rate. So you all have like 4 different rates. Well, excuse me, 3 different rates for this. The 4th would be the motor vehicle tax, but so you have a rate for the residential at 18,968, the rate for the frozen at 15.166, and a commercial rate of 22.866. And then we have tangible at the 19,968, which is the same rate as the residential real. So in summarizing all the above property taxes, excluding motor vehicles, we have a levy of 72 million. So what levy in citizens terms, what most people would recognize it as our tax, is our tax bill. What we're levying our levy against not against, but to the particular taxpayers to bring in that revenue to pay, excuse me, to pay for services here for the town that the town provides, So that's what that 72 million is. And then,
yep, to simplify that, the levy is the amount of tax money that we bring in based on the property in our town. That's the simplest form on what the levy is. And all of our budgets are predicated on the previous year's levy, and we're capped at 4% for the following year. But like Lisa went through that great explanation of how it's all done. But the simplified is, it's the amount we bring in, and that's what the levy actually is, based on the assessed value of all of that property.
right. And then if we looked at, I have that little box outlined here, just so you know, it's going to be part of the presentation for the budget. But right now we're on a 4-year average of 2.74, which is pretty low. But that's because we had a 0 last year. If we cap at 4%, which would be an increase in tax, would be an increase in tax, which is a cap of 2,884,341, 2,884,000. Our average would only still be 2.99, less than 3% over a 5-year period. So, which is pretty good. So that's what that is. And then we go down below and we see the motor vehicle, the levy. So we have the assessed value and the levy, and that's pretty consistent. So
Lisa, do these figures roll together, the municipal and the school budgets?
I'm not sure what you're asking me when you say, do they roll?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, is this the total town tax? This is the total picture for the whole town. That's what I'm asking. Yes.
The levy covers both the town and the school, not counting the school's state aid that they receive.
Okay, good.
This is what's generated from taxes, from property tax, from motor vehicle tax, and that's used in both the school and the town side. That's the total amount that we get out of those taxes for expenditures in both sides of the house.
So yes, so Ann, if you that 72,108, and you're asking me, I understand your question now. Does that take care of the school and town? Yes, like Ed said. So that would be really linked to our budget that we're going to present. And you can see right at the top here that proposed at 72,108 is for everything. So that's how that works.
I have one more question. We recently received a settlement, we call it the WED settlement. Where does money like that go? Into which category do we see it go? Does it sit in surplus? Does it sit in the fund balance? When we get some kind of money coming in, such as the WED settlement, where do we see that?
So that would go in the current year. So it would be, it would probably, most likely it'd be general government income. And so it would add to the current surplus. So if there's a, go ahead, Ed.
Nope, those funds like in the WED settlement are unbudgeted funds. There were no expenditures based off of them. There were unanticipated funds coming in. Those funds are not spent without authorization. So as Lisa said, they ultimately become part of the fund balance at the end of the fiscal year and any other excess money that wasn't spent out of the budget to help to increase that fund balance and get us to the point where we need to be. The bonding agencies prefer to see about a 15% fund balance of the total budget. We're at about 12, 13% right now in that ballpark. So we're getting to exactly where they'd love us to be, and which in turn helps to raise our bond rating on that. So any of that excess goes into there, unless the council so desires to do a special expenditure authorization, and then that money could be used.
So for example, I just want to clarify because I heard the word surplus used. Just to make sure everybody's understanding here, these are not funds that we can just throw into the operating budget, right?
They are not. If the operating budget is based on the anticipated revenue for each and every year, if you use revenue to fund operations on that are reoccurring operations, you end up doing, you produce a deficit spending, and what happens is the following year, you've got to try and find those funds from somewhere else. That's why you never ever just spend excess money like it's like it's free money and we just go out and we spend it. We can spend it on capital improvements, a non-reoccurring expense, and that's what you're allowed to. But if you try to do it on your operating, we're going to be in a world of hurt. Deficit spending is not the way we operate, and we never do in our town.
And that's to add to Ed's point, that's why I'm trying to find that little bullet point I had in here. That written plan, people are supposed to, you're authorized to spend so much on those items. And you're not, even if you have additional funds coming in from a source that Ann has, Ms. President has described, it's not for your judgment to spend it. Once this is passed on the revenue and expenditures, it's by law, it's supposed to be spent that way. So that's why it's governed by the state and local laws. Every fund, this is supposed to establish fund levels for the town services, and therefore all these departments, it's supposed to be a control mechanism for them to only spend what you have approved for, basically. Not anything extra unless you, like Ed said, that you later decide to approve.
I have another question, which I think people think about. When we approve, say, a municipal budget, we are approving a certain dollar amount, say, for parks and recreation, a certain dollar amount for public safety, et cetera. Suppose one of those departments needs money. What are the rules and regulations, laws that we have to abide by for the movement of money from one department category to another?
That's simple. If it's within their own line items, then the town manager can authorize the movement between line items and that person's budget. If you're moving funds from one department to another, that requires town council authorization to make that move. But within a department's budget, they have the leeway, and the manager has the authority to let them shift those funds up or down in the different pots they want to take it from. But their overall total budget has to remain the same. As I said, the only way we can move money from, say, DPW into Parks and Rec would be for the council to authorize moving that fund from DPW Parks and Rec. And we very rarely do that. If anything, it usually comes in at the very end of the fiscal year when we have additional funds where we employee costs, where we may not have used all of the salary line items because somebody left, they weren't filled, and or in the police department. And again, that still has to be authorized by the council if we're going to shift that to anywhere. So we can't just go and do it. The administration can't do it without the authorization of the council.
Okay, thank you.
President Dixon,
Yes.
can we build on your question just a little bit? Because I did have a question come in from a resident who along those lines had said, you know, it seems as though in the past we may have, you know, had someone like a DPW group come in, like one of the departments come in and need something, and we, you know, take a vote on how to spend something. So I'm not exactly familiar with what they're referencing because that's in the past, but let's just use this week as an example. So earlier this week, we approved, I don't know the official term for it, but it was the patching equipment for the asphalt. So when that comes in, can you just talk about that, Ed? So the department head, I'm assuming, comes to you and says, hey, we have an opportunity to use, you know, impact fees, or can you just walk us through that process?
If we've got any expenditure over $10,000, that's going to be, there's a couple of different criteria we can use. It's either going to be put out to bid, or it has to come off a master purchasing agreement, something that the state has, and we have different local groups, because the best prices are to be obtained on that. So anything over 10 grand requires that. It also further requires council approval of any expenditure over that. Under that, the town manager authorizes it. It's part of the budgetary process, but anything over 10 has to be authorized by the council. Anything involving land has to be authorized by the council. The council pretty much has final say on most of it. Like I said, the day-to-day cost under 10 grand, and that doesn't include things like utility bills. And even though they go over, they're not authorized by the council. They're done by the thing, because the total will be over 10 for the year, but the monthly bills are not. So.
And then, so that will come to the town council, but I think what I'm also trying to get at is we're not just approving randomly and saying, Ed, go find this money, right?
No, the money has to be in the budget somewhere. The money that's used, it's either part of one of their line items already, it's part of the fair share development.
Impact fees,
part of that, or like in Kevin's case, he also has a scrap metal account, which is we sell some of the metal that's picked up. It's put into a separate fund, and that's used like we did in this case. We use some of that to purchase something for the town, for a piece of equipment that's useful for the town. And that's the only thing that's allowed to be used for, but that's where those funds come from. We don't, in a case like that, we would never shift funds from one department to another simply to buy a piece of equipment from the other department, unless it was so critical that we needed it and we had no other way of obtaining the funds from that budget. Then we'd request from the council to make a shift. But I've been interim now almost 3 years, and we've never done that. We've never done that in the process of the budget.
okay.
Mr. Wazika, I have another question. We were level funded. We failed through 3 referendum. We were level funded. I think people need to understand what percentage of the municipal budget actually is represented by fixed costs. And maybe you can talk about what are fixed costs and what percentage of our budget is represented by these fixed costs. So that tells the taxpayers how much wiggle room we actually have.
I'll give you some examples. Fixed costs would be things such as electric, gas, fuel for the vehicles, health insurance, pensions. Pensions are a big piece of our budget. Our budget, debt, debt servicing. All of those are costs that are fixed costs. Employee costs are fixed costs, but they can be, by laying off people, you can reduce that fixed cost. The problem with that is, in the state of Rhode Island, like if you lay off an individual in a municipal employment or in government employment, we actually pay 2/3 of their unemployment. So to get the equivalent of losing one full-time salary, we have to lay off 3 people. So that's so even though it isn't a fixed cost, it can be a thing. Percentage, 95% of our budget is all fixed cost. We have very little playroom in it. Ms. Mills is bringing up the budgets now and some of the line items. If you look in, there isn't a lot of money in there that we have that we can
So,
use anywhere we want to use it. It doesn't work that way.
so, Mr. President, I was just gonna expand on what Ed said. Right now, with the way we're presenting the budget this year, we're gonna be breaking out the personnel and the benefits, which are fixed, and you're gonna see the operations, and the operations side, you can look at that and just really see how much you can really slice, and there's really not a lot. So, I mean, we're in the process of compiling that right now. I'm getting all the information from the departments on what they're requesting, and me and Ed are looking at them. But there, like Ed said, that there's a lot of like pension. I mean, the pension, I haven't done this year's estimate, but that's 2 million right there. That doesn't, there's other items that are not included in there. And you have the utilities, and you have insurance, which is huge. So once this is finished, I think you'll have a better idea of what kind of wiggle room or potential for savings you could possibly have by department. And it gets pretty small. I mean, you can just look at the, I mean, again, these are not done, but if you look at, let's see where we go to a simple one. We'll go with finance. You know, after the salaries and benefits, you know, our budget is 2,300 for miscellaneous expenses. So, I mean, you know, police obviously have a lot more operational items, but you know, when you look at the repairs and maintenance, you look at the vehicles repairs, you're really not, you know, out of a $12 million budget, you know, 500,000 is operational. So I think when we finish this presentation for you, the town council, you'll begin to see in this format, you'll be able to see what very little room there is for, you know, like savings per se. Do you agree, Ed?
Well, especially now over the last couple of years, we've had reductions in a 0 increase this current fiscal year. This year alone, we had to cut about $1.1 million that in increased costs that we had that were fixed costs that increased. With a 0 increase on the budget, that $1.1 million had to come from somewhere. So those areas where you see, like in the case of the police department, they had like less than $500,000 for fuel, maintenance repairs, and all of those things. It was actually higher than that the previous year. We cut them out of some of that. DPW, they lost parts. Parks and Rec lost almost $400,000 over the previous year's budgets. Because if you get a 0 increase, those fixed costs that increase every year have to be funded from somewhere. And the only place to cut them are those few line items, or in some cases, like even that this year, we lost 2 employees in Parks and Rec because of the cuts that we had. And there's nothing we can do about it. If the tax rate and the tax levy do not increase, our expenditures always increase. We have to find that money from somewhere, and it's usually out of these incidental costs. We reduced the amount of funding for sand and salt this year. Thankfully, it looks like we're going to be not too far over budget on that one because of the cuts that we made. And we had no choice. With a 0 increase on the budget, we have no choice but to make those cuts to fund those bills that we have to pay. Now, like I said, that was $1.1 million increased mandatory cost increases that we had. And that wasn't even including labor costs. That was all fixed costs that we have no control over.
Okay. I do have one more question, and I'm sure the public has questions too, but I don't want to go into a discussion of our ability to add to debt, but could you just give us an indication of what our debt service is right now?
Yeah, I mean, we can pull that up right now.
And as I said, I don't want to go into anything related to ability to pay. I just want to know what our status is at this moment in time.
Well, it all depends on what you consider debt in. I mean, our bond indebtedness
Yes.
is 5 million and change.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We
I
pay.
should have been specific. Okay.
So,
There's other types of debt that we have.
Yes.
The bond indebtedness, Lisa, you should have those numbers. It's about
yeah,
five.
can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so it's these two numbers right here, right? Well, 2.6 million right there, 2.7 actually. And then there's these two numbers right here, another 2.490. That's the bond. Those are the bond debt. So if we take both of those,
It's it's like $5.2 million ballparking
Yep.
on what we're paying in debt.
5190.
Yep. And you got to remember this, that's out of the $30 million municipal side of the budget. That's $5 million coming out of that for debt service for bonds, just bonds.
Yes,
So debt service includes both principal and interest. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Director Mills, I have a few questions also. And this, obviously could be Director Mills or Mr. Wazika. So where are the hidden accounts? Where's the hidden money?
who says there's hidden money?
Everybody.
Well, I think, you know what, with this new presentation, we're gonna provide for the town council and the citizens on I think this March 29th. I think this is gonna really show you what we really have. So like Pam is saying, I mean, we're talking this personnel with their benefits, 67, and you have this much for expenses. There's really not much for, at least in my opinion, there doesn't appear to be a lot of wiggle room. The thing of it is, when we stop purchasing, I think the director, Kevin, had stated that when you stop purchasing vehicles, this repairs and maintenance account goes up. So there's give and take on, on where you're going to spend the money, but I don't see, at least from my perspective right now, I don't see a lot of wiggle room on savings. I think you're bare bones.
Okay.
Every
Okay.
year the town by state law is required to have an outside auditing firm come in and analyze all of our expenditures, all of our revenues. And that audit is posted online. You can go back and get, I believe I got 10 or 12 years at least online. We're waiting for last fiscal year's audit to be complete, should be complete shortly, but every single dime coming in and going out is listed in there. It's a tough read. It's several hundred pages, and a lot of it is obviously all numbers, but everything is in there. I wish there were some hidden funds that we could go tap to be able to buy some equipment and fund the schools and do all the things. I don't know why people think that this exists. Our numbers are out there. They're always out there. The budgets are all out there. There's nothing, everything is transparent on the town's part on what's coming in and what's going out. It has to be by state law. If people would go to jail, not just getting a slap on the wrist, you're going to jail if you play games, and there have been people that have gone on the municipal and state side for embezzling funds, and it's not a game and we don't play around. So everything is there. It's out there. It's out in the public. Go look, call us. I will sit. I always have. Lisa will sit with anybody and explain. And anybody who has any questions or concerns, we'll take an hour, we'll take 2 hours, whatever it takes to get somebody up to speed and answer all of their questions. But this stuff is all out there. I wish there were some. There are none. There never have been, and there never will be. It just doesn't. We don't have enough money coming in to hide money. we're barely making it as we sit here today.
Okay, I have a few other questions as well. Can you talk us through the fiscal calendar, just so that people have an understanding? Why do we vote in June, July? How does the calendar year work? Can you just reiterate that for our audience, please?
You know, fiscal calendar, I mean, it's a July 1st to June 30th fiscal year. So we have to have we typically have to have our budget. And up to last year, we always have had it in place prior to. So there's a whole process that goes on with the budgets. As Miss Mills said, the budgets are presented by each department to us. We review, we knock down those budgets, we present it to the council, all on a time frame, and the calendar is posted online on the whole process, the public hearings, and the way that is done. Again, all transparent, all sitting there for people to see, and all of those numbers. We post each level of those budgets. So once our budget is done and we're going to be presenting it to the council, that budget will be posted online. Any changes you make or the council makes, those will be posted online. So people can track and see what's going on. But it's the budget process actually begins typically in November, December process. And it takes 5 to 6 months to go through everything and get to the point where we present a budget to the public. One of the things that's bothered me the most in this whole process is we have a lot of intelligent people working on a lot of hours to develop these budgets, and then they're rejected, and then we have to try to go back and make additional cuts and pull things out. And we've already put a budget forward that's absolute bare minimum of what we need. When we propose a budget to the council, there's never any fluff in that budget. We don't have the ability to put fluff in a budget, so they don't exist. So when we're forced to reduce those budgets even further, it means cuts in service. It means cuts in equipment. It means it's why we've got the fleet of 20-year-old trucks. It's why the schools have maintenance issues. All of these because we have budgets that people don't want to pass with those increases built in. So it makes it a very difficult situation to work and spend 5 and 6 months developing a budget that's developed based on the needs of the community, and then have that budget rejected and be forced to just take more money out of it to try and get that budget passed. We put it forward because that's what we need. I don't put a 4% budget forward because I want to. I put a 4% budget forward because I have to. There's no other. And so anything less than what's put forward initially means cuts and reductions, and there's no getting around it.
So you kind of answered my second question, was the approach to the budget. So for example, maybe some people do their annual budgeting for the year and they say, okay, I need about this much money, and then I'll just ask for 2% more because there might be something that comes up. It sounds like the approach is what is the minimum needed to do the services we do today, and that's what you're looking at pushing forward.
We do that. That is exactly how it's done. And I know the old thought process has always been that that's how we do a municipal budget. And if we don't spend our budget, we get cut the following year. Every year's budget is unique to itself. We do look at the expenditures from the previous year, but we don't allow our people in May and June and go, oh, look, I've got an extra $50,000. Let me go buy extra this or go buy that. We don't allow that. Every purchase is approved by the finance department. It's approved by the town manager. We sign off on every single rec that goes out the door. I sign off on recs as low as $1 and change when somebody's ordering the rubber fingers and it's happened, and we're signing off on that. So everything is reviewed. We don't just simply take last year's budget and say, up 2% more. Now, if there's a 2% increase in pay scales for the employees, then yeah, we obviously do that. But we also have to look at, are we losing employees? Are we going to get a new employee at a lower rate? If we got a retiree coming up, we look at that and we say, all right, so we're not paying $25 an hour, we're going to be paying $21 an hour. So we take that into account. So it's a fluid document. that is reviewed constantly. There is no such thing as just an annual 1%, 2% increase. And if you go back and look at some of the specific budgets of our different departments, and you'll see that. You won't see just a standard increase going on. You'll see it flow up, flow down in some cases. The flow down usually means we've cut it. Last year's budget, before the initial budget was put forward, I had already cut almost $1 million out of the request by the department heads before we cut that $1.1 million just to break even after the fact. So these things are not just a increase them to spend them. We don't do it that way. Lisa?
Yeah, I just wanted to expand on what Ed said, and it's right on point. And it goes to this last bullet in this summary. We literally used a multitude of information to determine this budget. We don't just take last year's and times it by 2%. That's not what happens. We use prior current year financials. We look at the trends on where an expense is going. We look at all these contracts, state aid, what's the projection for state aid, all these debt service commitments. There's a lot that goes into it. The pensions. It's not a standard 2%, like Ed had stated. There's a lot that goes into it.
And then Director Mills, you had showed us on the Excel earlier, some of the numbers year on year. Do you mind bringing that up? I had one question.
The expenditure or the revenue side, ma'am?
On, I think it was revenue side, because we were talking about the taxes.
Yeah.
The, is it on this one?
This piece?
Yeah, so on the area of the frozen, we were talking about frozen taxes at the lesser rate. Can you just give us an idea of what falls in there currently?
This 600, I would have to ask the tax assessor. I wasn't told that there's certain taxpayers that I guess the rules have changed. So you have to be here at 65, you have to be at 65 years old to get a tax freeze. You have to be here, I believe, living in this town minimum 5 years. But there was prior to that, there's also an income piece too, to get your taxes frozen, making only a certain amount of income. So I don't have all the rules in front of me, but we'd have to, I believe it's per the charter, correct, Ed? I think that's
for the tax ordinance. The tax ordinance specifies how someone can get their taxes frozen. The main one is you turn 65, 5 years, as Lisa said, 5 years of residency, and your taxes will get frozen. We are looking at this. We are reviewing it. This will be one of my projects to complete once our new town manager is seated at some point. So this is something we are looking at. If you look at that, we currently have almost 25% of our assessment, our real property is on frozen. Now, this will not generate additional revenue for the town by anybody who comes off freeze, because of the fact that the assessment has, the levy has to stay where it is. What it would mean would be a reduction, a possible potential reduction in tax rates, but it will not generate, removing the freeze or any part of the freeze or making changes in the freeze will not generate more money for the town because of 4452 and the way we have to calculate our tax, our levy.
That's a great point, Ed, because Miss Jen, if you see this 2.8 million, this is what Ed's talking about, that 4% cap. That's the max we can raise it. And how it's allocated above is if we tighten these restrictions, it would be savings towards the other residential. So that it's how we're going to allocate the tax. The tax is still going to be there.
Yep, that's the max we can increase.
Director Mills, could you go up to the place where it says the taxes are frozen?
Yes, ma'am.
Line was okay. Where it says tax rate, this is line 12, tax rate per thousand for the, which line? Okay, the tax rate under the frozen. I think that people need to understand that 15.166 is really an average rate because it depends upon when people come into the program. Their taxes are frozen at that point in time, and maybe it was 20 or 15 or 13 or what have you when they came in. So people need to understand that not everyone whose taxes are frozen is paying a tax rate of 15.166. That is an average number.
Ms. President, that's an excellent point. Because when this analysis is done and the tax assessor sends the certified rolls into the state of Rhode Island, the tax levy on the frozen property is the 9 million. This 15.116, as you can see in the box, it's a formula. So it is an average because there's multiple different times people have entered that program. Excellent point.
Thank you.
There's also one other little kicker when it comes to frozen. If you get your taxes frozen the year before a reval, and this has happened, they get frozen at that rate. Well, the reval brings the rate down. They've now frozen at a higher rate than what they would be paying if they hadn't frozen their taxes. And if you come in and ask to have that removed, there is a number of years waiting before you can go back and get it refrozen. So most people actually pay the higher taxes for the next couple of years before the rate actually equalizes back to what they had on the frozen. But this has happened on numerous occasions during the year before a reval.
And it's not, you could think about it as frozen at a particular rate, but it's really, people think of it as frozen at a particular dollar amount. Because if you were paying, say, $5,000 for taxes on your property, and then that was frozen, you continue to pay $5,000 each succeeding year.
Correct.
No matter what the new rate may or may not be.
Correct. All right, ladies, if you're ready, can we open this up to the public? And
Yes.
Or if you've got more questions, we'll answer those. But if you'd like, we can see if the public has any questions. I know I had a hand raised at one point and it's down now. Lisa, if you could kill your screen so we're back to full, and we'll bring up as necessary what people would like to see if they want to see something.
What do you want me to kill? How do I do
Kill
that?
your share completely so we go back to
Stop share?
yeah, please. There we go. All right. I have Kenneth is looking to ask a question. How did I do that? Hang on. Ken, you have a question? If you'd like, state your name. You don't have to. This is informal, but if you'd like to, you can. And go ahead with your question.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for the backdrop. My name is Kenneth Searle. Appreciate the information on the budgeting process. It's been informative. I have 3 questions. I'm going to shoot them at you rapid fire, then go back into mute and listen in because I'm trying to multitask here at home. Is the fire tax and the sewer assessment tax, I didn't see anywhere in the budget, so I'm assuming those are accounted for separately for town revenues and expenditures.
Fire tax is not part of the town budget in any way, shape, or form. They're
Okay.
separate districts. We have nothing to do with the fire tax at all. As
Okay.
far as the sewer assessment and the sewer use, that is an enterprise fund, and that has its own budget separate and apart from the operating budget of the town. And in fact, the sewer enterprise fund does not touch the operating budget, except for there's a $200,000 transfer that's used to pay part of the cost to West Warwick, and that's $200,000 out of the operating budget of the town. So that's the only area where it touches the sewer enterprise fund. The enterprise fund is a self-sustaining, self-contained entity in itself, part of the town, but separate and apart from the operating budget.
Got it. Okay, thank you for that explanation. My last question, I'm not sure if you guys have the answer to this yet. The American Rescue Plan has given Coventry roughly $3.5 million. Where is that going? What will that be used for? Do we know that yet?
We do not, and that's why we have not dealt with that today. These numbers are just coming out. We don't know. We don't know exactly what we're going to get. We're hearing different numbers. We also don't know exactly what it can be utilized for, in what way. And again, as I stated earlier, any funds coming in that are a one-time fund will not, cannot, and must not be used for an operating budget, and they won't be in this case, no matter what we receive. They will not affect our operating budget. They may be able to assist in some other areas on long-term, but they will not be able to be used on affecting our 21-22 budget because of the fact that it would create a structural deficit, and we can't operate that way.
Great. Okay, thanks again for your time.
You're welcome, sir. Thank you.
You bet.
Mr. Searle, I would like to mention to you, since you asked a question about the sewer tax, we are going to have a sewer workshop on March 27th, which is on a Saturday, in which we are going to be discussing, I guess you could say, the history of the sewer program. We're going to be talking about the Auditor General's report and responding to each of the recommendations that was made in that report. So if the sewer program is of interest to you, I would highly recommend that you would tune in on Saturday, the 27th.
Yes, ma'am, that is on my calendar. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today.
You bet.
Hi, Aaron. Welcome into the meeting. If you'd like, you can state your name. If you don't, we'll keep it at Aaron. And please feel free to ask any and all questions that you have.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me? I don't know if this is working.
Yes, we can. We can hear you fine.
My question is about each department. They make their own budget and they submit it to you to, I guess, merge it all together. How do you guys go about the hard process of deciding there's not enough money in the budget and we have to stack all these priorities and draw a red line and everything below the red line falls out?
The main priorities are the functions, the core functions of government, and what's needed to fund the core functions. What usually comes first on the chopping block are those things that make the town in some cases, but are not necessary to operate the town. Such as last year, we cut $400,000 out of the Parks and Recreation Department. It bothered me a lot to have to do it, but that's something that is not necessary to operate. We have to pick up the trash. We have to have town hall function. We have to collect taxes. We have to have planning department running. So those are the things that we need to do versus the things that we like to do. Put it that way. And the ones that we are not necessary are the ones that got cut first.
Right, so
we have to maintain core functionality of the town.
I guess my question was, once you've covered all of the needs and you have a list of wants, how do you decide which department's want goes first? How do you stack those wants?
That's easy because most departments don't really have a lot of wants. They're just trying to get the needs covered. They don't usually put forward too many wants. It's just not something we don't have a budget that allows for that in most cases. The wants are typically the capital improvement projects. Those are the wants, and those are put in, and everybody's there. And I mean, they're in the list. You'll be seeing the 5-year projected capital budget, and they're funded as we acquire the funds based on priorities that we determine are the most critical for the town. You know, like putting in a new tennis court versus paving a road. Paving the road because it's in worse shape would come first, obviously, than putting in a tennis court. So we do the same thing even on those capitals, and they are pretty much the only wants that we have are in capital. Budget-wise, it's just mandatory what's required to operate.
So can I build on Aaron's question a little bit? Because Aaron, I think that's interesting because maybe part of that is, you know, if we had wanted to do, for example, put money towards capital in a budget, we may not be able to do that to get a budget passed, right? So Ed, can you talk about that process a little bit to say, okay, you know, how do we put money towards capital or not for a year?
Well, once we put it into the budget and the cost for that line item is embedded into the budget, you only have to get it into the budget the first year because it's already in there. We currently have, 2 years ago, I was able to get a $200,000 capital line item in. that was approved and funded. So that's built in now. Every year, there's $200,000 for capital that's in there. It's a revolving fund, and it can be used by either side. Last year, it was used by the school side. This year, it's going to be used by the town side. This the budget that we're in right now, the 2021, I had attempted to get additional capital put into there. The budget failed. We don't have the additional capital on there. So, but it's a one-time deal. Once it's approved, it's there, it's built in, and it's in the system. We don't have to go back every year and ask for the same amount for that, as long as, I mean, unless the budget's cut. If the budget is cut by the public, that's a whole different ballgame. And if we reduce from the previous year, we're just going to be in such a world of hurt. It'd be ugly. But yeah, so that's how it gets in. That's how it stays in.
I would like to add another element to respond to Ms. Brewster's question. In each district, there is an elected official, your council person. We are responsible for understanding what are the needs and wants of the members of our particular district, but also we're responsible for the whole community. So when the town manager presents a budget, department by department, we have a presentation by each of the department heads, and we hear about what they want for their particular budget. Now we're sitting there as a council, and we're thinking about what have all of the voters in our particular district said to us during this, this year that has just passed. What are the things that are very important to them? And so we're alert to those kinds of voter feedback. And then we use that when we start asking questions about the budget that's being presented to us, because the budget that's presented to us is not a done deal. It's a discussion among the members of the council with the department heads and the town manager. Then we have hearings, and I've got on my list here, we've got at least 2 public hearings, one of which is on a Saturday. And during that time, the public can also respond. So there are lots of elements to building a budget. It starts with Mr. Wazika talking to each of the department heads and them submitting a budget, conversations with Director Mills, but then ultimately it comes to the council to make a decision. And we just have to be very alert to what's happening in our community. And we also have a fiduciary responsibility to our town and to all the taxpayers. So there are lots of elements to building a budget.
Anyone else in the public, please feel free. All right, good. I'm glad to see we get some hands raised. Okay. Erin, I'm going to remove you. And Joshua, I'm going to bring you in. Joshua, welcome to Budget 101, and feel free to ask any and all questions that you have.
Thanks for having me. I got a couple questions. Appreciate the transparency on the topic of secret accounts. I really appreciate that, showing all of this. I don't know if there's a way to slim some of this down. Multiple tabs on an Excel file is hard to follow in this type of format. Maybe at a future meeting to just kind of bullet point out each of the various departments, what they're spending, capital-wise investments, and then the fixed costs. Regarding fixed costs and capital investments, so we talk about we'll say debt. There's a debt that occurs when we don't invest in the town. We talk about trucks that are 20 years old, the schools that continue to, age, fall apart. We need to continue to invest in them. Is there a ratio of capital investment to operating costs that we should be targeting as a town to ensure our kind of future? I'll pause there and wait for.
There definitely should be. And I don't have the exact percentage. That's beyond my area. I don't know if Lisa would have a percentage, but there should be a much higher percentage of the total budget going into capital based on the asset valuation and the rolling stock and replacement of all of that. I don't have that calculation in front of me, but suffice it to say, it's a heck of a lot more than what we've been putting in. When I came on board with the town back in about 17 years ago, our former town manager, Fran Frobel, had a capital improvement program that was funded by about $1 million every year going into that fund. That is, I would hope to get at least into that realm at some point over time, and if we can, it would at least be a step in the right direction to be able to assist in taking care of some of these buildings. Again, it's not just school buildings. We've got town buildings as well. They've got vehicles, we've got vehicles, the whole process. But yeah, the fund to calculate it out, I don't have the number in front of me, but I would suspect it's probably a couple of $1 million a year. Lisa?
Yes, I mean, just to expand on that, Ed, there isn't really one set of capital ratios that would be applicable to municipalities as a whole. It just depends on their, they're going to be their capital base. Some towns own a lot more historic buildings. Some towns own, a multitude of different recreation centers. So the ratios, there's not really a standard ratio, but I do agree with what Ed stated. There should be a somewhat fixed amount of capital that is going to be going back. I mean, I'm used to seeing capital invested of about $1 million, and that's usually on a capital lease basis spread over 5 to 7 years. That's what I'm used to seeing on a standard municipal budget, and we only have 200,000. So it's quite small considering the size of this town and the people and the infrastructure. But it seems there needs to be some kind of maybe I think that's something that the town manager and I'm sure the town council has addressed in the past of what are the town's needs and where do we want to go and how are we going to invest in this. That's a big question. And like Ed stated, when it's tough to get a budget passed at 0%, how do you put the capital in there? So it's a good question.
Josh, any others?
Yeah, I guess Ken touched on it earlier with his question on the American Rescue Act and where that, as reported in the Providence Journal, 3.4 million it would be invested in Coventry. It seems like it's paying for services interrupted by COVID, right, is kind of the headline. So I imagine that would be some of the plexiglass that was purchased by the municipal side schools, maybe the HVAC evaluation that had to occur in the schools. I don't know if that's already been broken out in the budget or something to present in future, we'll say, discussions on the budget.
Well, some of this has already been, some of it's already been paid through other through past programs, federal programs. So again, we've got to look at it. We don't even know exactly what we're going to get. I mean, the numbers we're seeing in the paper look great, but that's not necessarily what we're going to have. What's happened in the past on some of this as well is they've actually used that to fill gaps with funding in reference to motor vehicle or school funding. But we have no clue at this point. Bottom line is it would not be used for operational purposes at all, no matter what the amount is. If anything, it will be used to pay off some of the equipment only. But yeah, it will not be used for operation. It will not affect our budget in any way. It can't, it won't, and we won't do it that way. And if the community does, they're going to have problems the following year when those funds dry up. So it will not be used that way by us.
So Josh, you had an interesting question earlier about capital expenditures and what we're spending there. And I'm going into this budget season, asking for feedback from, people in my district, and all districts is welcome. But personally, I'm thinking about, what do I want my community to look like? What do I want service-wise? Because at this point, operating off of the 0% increase from last year, to me at least, it feels that is not appropriate for this year. So I need to personally ask myself as a resident of the town, I need to ask myself as a council representative for District 2, what do we want our community to look like, and what does that mean to the taxpayer? So we're certainly going to be thinking about that, and I will be asking that question to people that I have discussions with. If everyone on this call could think about that and reach out to your council person, because ultimately we'll be deciding on whether that budget goes to the townspeople for the vote. So thank you for kind of bringing up that capital aspect.
If funds are available, we will be adding additional capital into this year's budget. If this budget, when it's finally presented and is rejected again, and we're forced to go with a zero increase again in fiscal 21-22, I will say this: with the amount of fixed increase costs that we're facing, we are looking at kind. I'm not gonna say where it's coming from. I'm not gonna make it sound like we're throwing threats out there. I want people to understand there will be legitimate reductions in service and employees if we're running another zero increase budget in FY 21-22. There is no way to avoid further cuts to programs and services with the increased fixed costs that we are facing in the upcoming year. It's critical that we have a budget.
Can you talk about that a little bit, Ed? So the term fixed, maybe for some people, means that cost wouldn't go up. So can you give us an example of a fixed cost that goes up?
Yes, insurance,
Pension.
medical insurance, pensions go up, electric goes up, phone service goes up, water goes up, and hard to believe, even sewer usage goes up because we pay, even though with the sewer enterprise fund, the town pays a sewer usage fee, just like everyone else does. I mean, so all of these things go up, they affect, and they increase those base costs. Before we even add a dime of additional wants or needs, in most cases, it's just trying to get back some of the needs that we have before any of that. So even running off of last year's total number, again, we have to work off of last year's levy. And if that levy is at the same amount, we have to give the school identical to what they got this year. So if we have $1 million in increased cost and we have the same amount of money as last year, we have to cut $1 million from other areas. And those only other areas, services and employees. And as I said, the big problem with employee cuts, it takes 3 to get 1 because of the fact that we pay 2/3 of a laid off employee's salary or unemployment. We've got to lay off 3 people to get the equivalent of one person's salary savings. So it amounts to some severe cuts that have to take place. And $1 million is going to, if we have to do it and we are forced to do it again, it's going to mean some severe restrictions and severe reductions in what the town offers and how we provide those services to people. It could include up to and including a reduction in hours for being open. We don't know at this point. Again, it's all going to depend on what happens with where these final numbers show up and what happens with the public. We don't ask for these increases in our budget because we want them. We don't ask for them so we can raise the tax rate. We ask for them and we put this out there because we need them. We need those increases to properly operate the town and to give the residents of the town the services that they need, want, and desire. And those services cost money, unfortunately. And as long as we are not funding them, we have to cut more and more of them to be able to operate and keep the core function of government operating. And if that's what people want, then that's what we'll end up going down to. Again, it's not a threat. It's not, I don't work that way. I want people to understand the reality of where we are and what's going on. And I don't want somebody to go, why are they cutting that? Why are they doing that? They're doing it just, we're not. I don't want to cut anything. I'd like to improve some of the services we offer. I'd like to be able to come in and somebody comes in and go into our tax assessor's office and not have just 2 people in an office that has twice as many properties as a place like Charlestown, who has twice as many employees that are able to service the customers. I want people to not have to come in and wait in line to talk to the tax assessor or talk to planning. We'd like to get our planning process and our economic development process streamlined even more. We can't do that with the number of employees we have, the reviews and the things that go on. That's where all of these cuts affect. They affect every aspect of how this town operates. And we have no choice but doing that if we don't get funded to the level that we put forward in a budget. These budgets are not wants, they're always needs. And that's what we put forward is always a need budget. And whatever we have to cut, it means we're cutting in services and employees, and we're cutting the funding to those levels. And the school department's a big example of what happens if they don't get the increases that are necessary over there. This is something that affects both sides. I can't emphasize it enough. We put out a budget that is reasonable and required. It's the amount we put forward is what we need to operate and operate at even not the level I'd like to see, but just at the bare minimum level. That's all we're asking for. I don't want to pay higher taxes. None of us do. But I understand that at times we've got to pay. Your electric goes up. Your insurances go up. Your automobile, our gas prices are skyrocketing right now. And I'm scared what that kind of an increase is going to mean. We spend a lot on gasoline for our vehicles. They're out on the road all the time. And that's going to be an increase in our cost that we are just starting to see. And we don't even know how high that's going to go. And that's a concern because we're going to have to make an estimate on just how high it's going to go and what our costs are going to be for the fiscal year when we don't even know. I'm seeing 55 cents increase already in the last 3 months, 2.5 months. How much higher is it going to go? Are we going to hit $4 a gallon? And we estimated $3 a gallon. And if we're burning up 400,000 gallons, that's $400,000 we're short or more. So all of these factors, we're making assumptions. We put it forward because we need it. We're not putting it forward because we want it. Hope that answered your question, Josh.
No, that was great. I don't know if there's others waiting. I can step aside, but I have a couple more questions if you don't mind.
We have another person with a hand raised, but that's what we're here for. We'll be here as long as we have people who want to ask questions. We're here to try and educate and get people to know.
I'll yield my time for the other member of the public, and you can come back to me.
You sure?
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Mr. Bro.
Mike, you're brought in. You're in the meeting. Welcome to Coventry's Budget 101. Feel free to ask any and all questions. It's what we're here for. Mike, you need to unmute, please. Mr. Briol, you need to unmute. There we go. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Ed. The question would be for Lisa. How do you get an exemption on commercial property?
So they would have to file an application with the assessor. So
What kind of exemption are you speaking about, Mike?
Well, I understand, the income for personal property and if you're 65, but that's why I was wondering, how do you get one on the commercial side?
You don't get one on commercial. It's only for residential.
Okay, thanks.
Only residential. That does not involve commercial property.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Is that it?
Yep.
Thank you for joining us today. Hillary, welcome aboard, and thank you for joining us today. In all questions, we will try and answer for you.
Thanks. I really appreciate the town taking the time to do this. And I hope everybody knows on the call that not all cities and towns do this, and this is a great opportunity. So I appreciate you taking the time on a Saturday to do this. My question is for Ms. Mills. I know at the last couple of council meetings, you've brought up the town's debt and the bond rating and how we've been able to pay down that debt. Could you talk about how the rejection of a budget affects the town's ability to pay down that debt and then subsequently its effects on the bond rating for the town?
Well,
We have to pay our debt.
yeah, we have to, I mean, if you look at it, I mean, those are great questions, but like Ed stated, the debt has to be paid. And so if you kind of put it in almost like a personal perspective, if you went the same year after year and had the same pay and you have this debt, obviously your assets are going to dwindle because you're paying off your old asset. You're using old assets to pay, debt. Okay. So it's never going to be in a good situation when we have a zero tax increase. I don't think this town, I understand, like Ed stated, most people don't want to pay increase in taxes. I understand it, but there's a certain level of service. 0% taxes doesn't even cover for, the trash. You have town services for trash removal. A lot of towns have to pay. The citizens have to pay. So I'm not, I mean, it's not a positive effect, not raising your taxes to cover debt service. It affects not just debt service, it affects every aspect of the town, like Ed had stated. You know, everything goes up. I mean, so not increasing your taxes at all, I mean, it's really tough to pass a budget. If everything, I mean, you look at anyone could look at their own personal finances and you know, your insurance goes up, you know, well, maybe probably not your mortgage, but certainly gas, like, you know, Ed had stated, I mean, I just filled up my vehicle, it was like $46. I was like, oh my God. I was like, so, you know, if you're not getting that increase in taxes, you're not covering these increase in costs. I mean, it's, you know, so it is going to affect that service and it's going to affect future, you know, future projects, whether they be capital, you know, capital in nature for the town or the school. I mean, it limits the ability to get them. I mean, to really say, can we do it? Does that answer your question?
All debt has to be paid first, Hillary. If we fail to pay that debt, whether it be bond indebtedness or pensions, it will adversely affect our bond rating. And we will have a downward trend on our bond rating, which in turn will make things more expensive anytime we try to have to go back out and do bonding at a later date. And it could, to the point, make it impossible to bond if our bond rating dropped low enough. So debt is always the first thing that gets paid, and that's why you see the services and the services in the programs are what gets cut, because the debt has to be paid. We have no option on that. It's like your mortgage. You have to pay that, or you're not going to have to worry about anything else because you're not going to have a place to stay. So we have to pay that first and foremost.
And this might be another question for Ms. Mills, but how far away would we be, and does you know, approving a couple years of budgets get us to a point where we could have a rainy day fund again, or you know, what kind of trajectory are we on to be in a place like that? We
have a rainy day fund now. I mean, we have that, the so-called rainy day fund. That's a fund balance. That's what people call it, the fund balance, the rainy day fund. It goes by a bunch of names. We have that's approximately $12 million under the last audit. That's there. That's necessary, required, and the bonding agencies like to see 15%. We're at about 12% thereabouts, give or take. Hopefully, we'll get to that 15% at some point. So we have moved that number up over the last couple of years. But that fund exists. It's always existed, and it's gotten a little bit better over the last couple of years. So that's increased.
And that's separate from the school department's fund balance, correct? So the money that Mr. Levis is talking about for the COVID expenditures would come out of their fund balance.
And their fund balance was actually just the money they saved in last year's budget over because of the distance learning and the money they saved in there. That's where their fund balance is. They don't typically have reserves. That just happened to be from last year. So yeah, that doesn't come from the other side, the town side.
Okay. And then do we have any restrictions on what we can use fund balance money on, or how does that, do we have any rules in place for that?
There are rules in place. There's state law in place. There are a lot of factors on that determine how and when we can use that. If you use that, so if you use the fund balance, and a couple of communities have done it in this current budget, the 2021 budget, because of COVID and the effects on it, and they've used that. They are creating a structural deficit in their budget by using one-time funds to fund operational costs. You never want to use one-time funds to fund operational costs. I mean, it's just basic financial responsibility. And so that's why we never do it there. If you're going to use it, it should be used sparingly. It has been used in the past. We loaned money to the sewer enterprise fund to cover their operating costs for a couple of years. We've actually worked on getting that money back. It was at $3.5 million had been lent over to the sewer enterprise fund, and that number is now down to about $1 million off the top of my head. So that's been reduced quite a bit, and we're working on getting that the rest of that back over into the fund balance of the town.
Okay, that's all the questions I have right now. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Joshua, we're back to you, sir.
Thank you. Appreciate the other questions. Those are great. As Hillary mentioned, right, it's great to have this transparency from the town. In a way to compare Coventry to other municipalities, right? Coventry is the seventh largest municipality in Rhode Island. When you look at school districts, it's easy to compare, per pupil spending. Coventry Schools is right in line. Academic outcomes right in line with some other municipalities of our size. How does our tax rate and or tax expense compare, right? I think there's, similar to the secret accounts that Jen referenced, right? There's a perception that Coventry has a very high tax rate and or expense. I don't find that to be true in my own perusal of taxes across the state, but is there a way to compare town to town that's efficient, effective?
Office of Municipal Finance, state agency, collects all of that data and they present it on a yearly basis. And it's in graph form, chart form, and you're able to compare apples to apples with all the communities. And you're right, we're not at the highest. I mean, people have used that out there a lot. It's not. You brought up a good point. I'm gonna put couple of those charts and graphs into our financial data on our website so people can go there quickly and easily and look it up. You can compare one to the other. You can compare the tax rates. We'll put some of those up on the increases that some of the other communities have faced. You're going to find that most people are going to find that most communities are in the same ballpark as we are on the average tax rates that are going up. I mean, we're no different from anyone else. Our costs are the same cost as everyone else is facing. We actually function at, I think, a much more efficient rate than some communities. When you look at our department budgets versus some of their department budgets, that makes it a little bit more difficult to find because those are presented anywhere in a combined view. You'd have to go and pull department by department. So you're right. The best way is to look at those charts and graphs, and we will post them up on our website so people can see them. But yeah, we're right in line with where everyone else is.
So I just want to make one comment because Josh, I was thinking very similarly to you over the last year in terms of, are we doing something wrong, or are we, what is causing, kind of a negative, I guess, feeling or whatever it is people are feeling on the budget process. And so I actually have an intern that I'm working with look at those rates. So for example, I said to her, hey, can you go to the town websites over the following locations and let's look at what their tax rate was for last year. Let's look at what some of those, pardon me. Let's look at what some of those expenditures were. Oh my gosh, I can't talk, hold on. I'm sorry. So looking at a comparative analysis, I think is very important. So having some color here, I think would be helpful for the whole town, not just, certain individuals, but and it sounds like a good idea to get that to everyone to say, hey, where do we fit in Rhode Island, not just individually.
If you look on screen, I've got it up right now on the 2020 tax roll and the tax rates and where we are comparative to the other communities in the state. I mean, our residential is at 1897. Barrington's at almost 21. Foster's at almost 24. Johnston's at 23. Lincoln's at 20 and change. I mean, you look at those. You look at our motor vehicle. Our motor vehicle also is one of the lowest in the state. That perception that's out there that we are taxing our people to death and we crank it out over anybody else it's a fallacy. It's downright wrong. And when you simply look at this chart and look at the valuation, now again, it's not 100% to 100% because there's always some variance in one community to another. We're at different levels of the reval and all of those different things. But it's a snapshot in time. And when you look at the snapshot of last year's tax rates I mean, we are middle to bottom is where we are. I mean, we are not at the top by any means. High rate on here looks like, who's the winner? CF
Providence 24.
24. Providence is the winner. And then CF is right behind, and several others are up in there $23 and change. You know, and then you do, I mean, you do have the Jamestowns, $8 a thousand. But when you look at their total assessed value of property in Jamestown, you understand why the tax rate is where it is, because their assessed value is monstrous on the value of their properties. Block Island is, or they're down, New Shoreham. Where are they? They're at $6. But again, the average house in New Shoreham is probably $1 million valuation or more. So, and again, and their costs are low. They don't have a lot of government costs. So, but again, when you look at the town, cities and towns and our range, Cumberland is a little bit lower. They've got some lower school costs than we do, and they're about the same size as us. North Providence, same way, and they're $4 more than we are. So I mean, we're in a good range. We're not outrageous. We're not like people are trying to put it out there. There's a lot of misinformation out in the public. That's what today is all about, and what we're trying to do moving forward. And I'm hoping that when people see this and see these numbers and see where we are, that we can get people to understand on our budget and maybe come out and pass these things. It's not what people think we're doing.
You know, I think charts like this are very useful, but I believe that most members of a community are not pulling up charts like this and comparing the tax rate in one community to the other. At most, when people are thinking about moving, they may decide, well, maybe I'll go to community A versus community B because the tax rate is a little bit lower. But I think overall, it's a very subjective concept. People have a perception of value. That's what they do. They think about what is the value that I'm getting for the money that I am paying, and what is my perception of my ability to pay. And so it behooves us as council people to try to emphasize and to point out the value that people are getting for their tax dollar. So the value in Coventry, we need a unified message so people understand that we do have waterways, we do have bike trails, we do have nice wooded areas where people can take hikes. We do have a commercial center at the center of New England, et cetera. So we need to point out the value that people are getting as a resident of this particular community. So again, what I want to say, everyone is not looking at those charts. It's very useful for people who are on councils, who are town managers, et cetera, to see where we are. But the baseline is, are we providing value for what the people are paying? And that's what we're trying to do when we are bringing forth all these department heads to the council meetings so that people can understand, well, what does DPW actually do? What does Department of Human Services actually do? And even if I am not personally receiving a benefit or service from, say, Human Services, we have to understand that there's a large percentage of the community out there who are getting value and services from that particular department. So there's a lot to consider. It's both objective, but there's a big subjective element here, and we need to understand our role in showing the value that we actually do provide as a community.
If I could just add on that, I totally agree with you on your statements, but I think this year, and we're putting together a little bit more of a summary, and we can explain these. And I had planned on putting these charts in and showing a couple comparisons with similar towns. I think sometimes, I mean, yeah, I don't think they're going to go into the websites and pull these charts up, but I think if we include it in the budget and list these services that we're providing, and just a small little summary, but put the comparative out there. And the chart that I showed this morning about the summary of the assessed value of the history for the town of Coventry is going to be in the town budget. And I think people are going to be surprised to see that your average is only 2.74. That's on the bottom third for this state of Rhode Island. So I don't know if it's perception or just not seeing it. I think it might be a combination of both. I think sometimes providing a little more detail in simple forms and presentations will help greatly. I mean, and stating what you said, Ms. President, is listing kind of like a summary of what we provide. You're talking about the commercial center, and I think a little summary of that would be very helpful for people.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I guess I was looking, and Ed, you got into some of the challenges of looking at the tax rate, right? Property valuation comes in, the rate varies, the services that you mentioned, President Dixon. So is there a way to maybe break it down by tax levy per resident or something, right? We look at per pupil spending in a school district that maybe would equalize it across all those different variables. Hard to quantify some of the value of living in Coventry. I agree, right?
It is. It's a very difficult thing to do, unlike the school side. School side's easy. We could do a basic cost per resident and try and do an evaluation based on, but it's not going to tell you what services you're getting. So yeah, to put a number and quantify it with the value is just a difficult process.
One of the things that I was thinking about is perhaps our need to identify 3 to 5 indicators of health of our community. And I don't know what those financial indicators would be, but I have been doing research on it and looking at different communities and different state reports. And I think that there are ways that we can present all of the data that Director Mills is presenting to us in some simple graphic form so that people can look at some of the indicators that they can use to understand the health of our community. It doesn't get to the point of the value, but it might be the bridge between all the numbers and the value.
The big issue with our budgets, we have a lot of debt. And that debt is costing us a substantial amount of money every year that has to be paid. As that debt goes down, our ability to do other things increases. And once we get that down, we'll be able to do a little bit more and start adding in for those capital improvements to add more of those things that the town, the residents would like and want to see. Improve our recreation department, improve our fields and our all of our facilities that we have. So it's all part of where we're trying to get to.
Mr. Wazika, could you just repeat again, and I know you talked about this a little bit, what's the debt associated with just pension costs?
The debt associated with pension costs, if you're talking about the ARC.
Yes.
Lisa, can you put up the ARC? Do you have the ARC payments handy?
I have the total liability as of the 12/31/19. It's 161 million. Unfunded pension. Are you talking about the unfunded pension?
That's the unfunded liabilities.
Yes.
Of total unfunded liabilities of the pensions.
Yes.
A police pension is about $65 million. The SRP pension, which is a school pension, and as well as the municipal pension. The municipal pension is actually the one pension in our town that's locked out. It's now a closed pension. We moved away from a defined benefit pension about, I want to say 6-7 years ago. So any new employees coming in that are not police officers or not working for the school, but our municipal employees, our DPW people, our town hall people, they are all on a 401k style plan. They're no longer on a defined benefit style plan. So that unfunded liability is creeping, getting better and better by the year because we have no new people going on to it. So that would, the police one and the SRP one, they're still open, they're still adding new members, and those costs are increasing. We've done a lot to change the dynamics of the police pension. It's not set the same way. With the requirements are more stringent. The amount of pension that the officers receive when they retire, it takes them longer to get there, and at a smaller amount than what they had received in the past. And that's going a long way in helping to get that pension under control. Our debt service, we've got $35 million in bonds between town and school. That's not counting the sewer enterprise fund, which is off the top of my head, it's probably somewhere close to that amount, similar. I don't have the exact number in front of me on that one. But that $35 million is a $5.1, $5.2 million annual that we're paying in that debt service. The police pension is over $5 million. That's over $10 million right there out of a $30+ million town budget. There's a third of it. And before we begin to do anything else. So these are the things, these are the challenges we face that, and we're working on reducing some of that. And that's why when bonding is a big issue, pensions are a big issue, and we're working on all of that to try to bring it in line and get it better than what it's been. And I think we have. If you look at our audited statement, the 19 over the 18, our total debt, a net position improved by $2 million. That's a good jump in a year where we actually had a bond on the police station come into. So we're working on getting rid of some of this, and we're working on cleaning things up, and we are getting better. We're getting much better. A zero increase on this budget this year is going to go a long way to killing some of those improvements that we've made. And that's why we have to all keep emphasizing that we need the increases in the budget, needs, not wants. Josh, anything else?
I guess just, again, linking back to the question or comments that Ken had earlier, right? We talk about the real estate tax, but there's also the fire tax, the sewer tax, right? I don't know if there'd be a way in future presentations to kind of compare other municipalities that have a separate fire tax to what Coventry is paying or being taxed on.
Well, the problem with the fire tax is the different districts have different rates affecting different parts of the town. So it makes it very difficult to come up with a number because they are so different. As far as you use the word sewer tax, it's not, I know, I guess if you want to look at anything else,
cost per usage basis.
It's a sewer assessment based on the construction, and it's a sewer use fee. So it really technically isn't a tax, but it is an assessment and a use. And again, that is separate and apart, and it's got its own, for the first time, because of the increase that we put forward in the council passed on the sewer use, we are for the first time meeting our obligation of the 1.25% of revenue versus expenditures. And that's the first time, and that's obligated by the issuance of the bond issuing companies, as well as and it's something we finally are at the point of doing. So that's that fiscally that has gotten much stronger, and we'll be going into all of that in a couple of weeks on that program we're going to be doing to get some, because there are a lot of misconceptions about that as well on the sewer system. Is it good? It's much better than it was. You either love them or you hate them. If you got them in front of your house and you want them to be there, you're loving them. If you got them in front of your house and you don't want them to be there, you hate them. It's the way it goes. I've had people calling me, asking me, please, when are we getting sewers in my area? I've got a failing septic system. I want it. I'd rather pay sewers than pay for a septic system and then get hit with a sewer later on. So it's something that we'll discuss in 2 weeks. But yeah, it's not really a tax. I try to avoid calling it a tax.
Apologies for the misnomer. Thank you.
No problem, sir. Anything further?
No, thank you so much for the time and the transparency. Really appreciate it.
No, thank you for calling, sir. I'm glad we've got people that are on and engaged in this today. Thank you. Hillary, welcome back.
Thank you. Just one last question. I think it's really helpful when, Mr. Wazika, you were saying how this is what we stand to lose should the budget be rejected again. Do we explicitly state in the town financial meeting slide deck or the packet? I know we say things are urgent or this needs to get funding, but do we explicitly state here's what you stand to lose, or here are the consequences of rejecting the budget in the packets or in presentation.
We haven't, we've refrained from doing that in the past, only because at least personally, I interpret it to mean people interpret it as a threat. That we're
Okay.
threatening of what we're gonna do.
They call it a scare tactic.
Yep.
Exactly, and we avoid that. We try to avoid that. This year, because of what the potential impact of a rejected budget this year and what it's going to do, because of the fact that we've cut the way we've cut in our current budget to be able to go with a zero increase. And we had planned on that once COVID hit and we made those cuts. But I never planned on a second year of this, and it's going to have devastating effects. So it's something I'll discuss, or actually, depending on if I'm still here or there's a new town manager, that they'll discuss with the council on the tactics and the way they want to, the way they want to present the budget and what they want to add into those mailers and the whole messaging that they do. That's something that will be discussed.
Just on a personal, I liken it to being told to get your oil changed in a car, right? You're told, oh, you should do this every so many miles or every so many months, and and then if people are told, well, if you don't do it, this is what's going to happen. Like you're going to have to pay and make some more serious repairs, or so I think sometimes a tactic like that is a fact. But I see what you're saying. It makes total sense.
And I did go into that a bit last year, and I talked about the reductions in services with DPW and the reductions in services with Parks and Rec. And immediately again, I was accused of throwing scare tactics out there.
Sure.
Oh yeah, you're going to take away our trash pickup, which it wasn't. It's yard waste, the transfer station, all of those things would go first because trash pickup is a necessity. Yard waste isn't. The transfer station isn't. Parks and Rec, as much as that makes our town, and our Parks and Rec department does one heck of a great job in the programs they do.
Absolutely.
It's not necessary to operate our town. And if the cuts that have to be made, that's where they're going to come from. I can't avoid it. The town can't avoid it. I'm not going to cut trash pickup or snow plowing and keep the Easter egg hunt going. You can't have those wants if the needs aren't being met. So it has to be the wants have to go first, and the needs have to be funded, and that's the only way we can operate. And you're right, we may have to put that message out there even stronger this year than last year, and try and get people to understand this is not a threat. This is a promise of what will happen because we have no choice.
It's a reality. Yep.
It is. It will be a reality, and there's nothing we can do about it. It is what it is, and there will be severe cuts in Parks and Rec. And on the niceties, the bulk pickup. Many communities, they offer bulk pickup once a year, maybe twice a year if you're lucky. Same thing with the lawn waste. We do bulk pickup around the calendar. You call, we pick it up at your house. You don't even have to come down and drop it off. We'll pick it up for you and bring it down. All of that costs money, not only for the manpower, but even for the disposal costs down at the central landfill. That's an added cost. Our yard waste, we already exceeded the year's allotment back in, I believe it was January. So there's additional costs that go on that will get cut. We won't pick it up. We won't have to pay the men and women to pick it up. We won't have to pay to dispose of it. It will save money and allow us to keep the core functions going. But it is going to happen if this budget fails. We will have no options. And on the school side, I will not speak for what's going to happen there, but I will say I know it will be severe because they will have no options as well if we have a zero increase budget again this year. It is going to be devastating to our citizens if this happens. And the purpose of today's meeting isn't to get that message out. This just happens to be secondary that we're going on it. The purpose of today is to let people know how the whole process works, what we're doing, and what we're doing to make it as transparent as possible for everyone. That's the goal of this. Anything else, Hillary? Because I appreciate your questions.
No, I appreciate your answers. And, one of the things, especially as it relates to school, is not not understanding the full budget too. I think, anytime you say schools, people just think teacher salary. Everybody thinks that's where the 100% of the budget goes. And, I'd look forward to working with Ms. Mills and you, Mr. Wazika, to, try and get some more information out there in different ways. Instead of just relying on hopefully someone stumbles upon the YouTube recording of this or the listings on the town site for sure.
Any and all things that we can do to get our message out, I am all for. We need to do a job. That's why even at budget time, we put our ads in the newspaper. We've been utilizing robocalls, which I don't know, sometimes that might be irritating to some people. We put mailings out in the past. Mailing's an expensive proposition. That's
For sure.
That's over 20 grand that we spend. And I've had more people say, oh, I never got it. We send it out to every address in our town. And like I said, it's a very expensive process, and we've got very little bang for our buck out of that. So anything new, I mean, social media is great, and any other messaging that we can get out there, I love it. I'm looking forward to you joining and helping to get that message out there to everybody.
Thanks. Thank you again for answering my questions and for the panel today, for taking time on a Saturday.
That's what we're here for. You're going to find that out. Okay, do we have anyone else that has a question or would like to speak? Did I? Yep, she's there. All right. I was hoping I didn't remove Hillary. I just removed her ability to talk. Anyone else? It's been almost 2 hours we've been going. We still have 21 attendees. We did this in person one time, and Councilman LeBlanc, who was not a councilman at the time, him and I think 2 other people showed up, and Mr. Arnett and I did this. We didn't have any council members with us. Ladies, I thank you both for joining us on this today and adding your input as well as your questions on this. But I'm happy to see it's an improvement. We've got 21, so that's like 18 more. We're up by like 500% more than we had in the last time. So,
well, we have to thank your wife for attending, my husband for attending too.
Yeah, no, we're not going to go into that. No, no.
That helps build up the numbers.
Yeah. I personally, again, depending on what goes on, I think as we get closer to the budget vote, I think we should do this. Another one of these should be done at least once more. And again, we can try to get some more engagement from others on it. But everything we can do to try to get our message out there, I think works and helps.
Well, we do have a Saturday session, which is a public hearing on the budget. We're actually having 2 public hearings,
Yep.
One on May 5th and one on May 8th. And we specifically are scheduling one on Saturday, so we might be able to attract people who would not want to or be able to attend in the evening. So I hope this helps.
I do too. It's I think it does. I think what we're doing and the message we're putting out there, and the bottom line though is I want people to understand. I'm not trying to scare anybody by saying what we're looking at and what the effect of a 0 increase budget is going to be. I'm just being honest and truthful and being transparent and telling you and telling people, and please tell your friends, tell your neighbors, it's going to be severe cuts. They have to. We have no option otherwise if we have a 0 increase budget. I'm always available. Lisa's always available. You have questions, you can email them to us. Our emails, our first initial and last name at coventryri.org. We're on social media. Whatever way, feel free to call us. Call Town Hall. We'll talk to you. Anyone, everyone will answer your questions. So you're not just restricted to this time. We are available at all times to answer these things. So we want to assist people in understanding the process. I know it's we have $108 million, $109 million budget. It's a big budget. We're not a mom and pop bodega. We're the 7th, as Joshua mentioned, we're the 7th largest community in the state. Our budget reflects that, and the complexity of our budget reflects that. And if we have nothing else, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. I appreciate everyone who did. And Jen, Lisa, and Ann, thank you very much for working with me on this one today, because I'd hate to be talking for 2 hours myself. But some people say I can talk all day without a problem. Lisa, sorry for interrupting you at times.
No worries.
All right, if
I just asked Lisa, one more question. Director Mills, how many weeks have you been with us?
I think it's been 4 weeks.
4 weeks.
4 or 5 weeks total. If I was to count the days, it seems longer. I'm just kidding.
I just wanted the attendees who are on the call with us to understand you've only been with us for 4 weeks,
Yes.
and for them to appreciate, I'm sure they do, but appreciate what knowledge you've been able to develop about our municipal budget and all the work that you've been able to do in putting together these reports for us. And that's 4 weeks' time. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
But Ann, you got to remember something. This is like dog years, okay? Coventry finance time, like dog years. So every week is actually the equivalent of about 6 months. So she's actually been here the equivalent of about 2 years anywhere else. She's Lisa has done a phenomenal job on getting everything and getting things under control and getting us to the point where we are. I can't thank her enough. She has been, and I'm not saying it because I hired her, she is an amazing addition to our town.
Yeah, but based on your theory, I think you want her to stay at least 20 years.
I want her to stay for the rest of her time in government.
Okay.
Stay right here in town because she is a phenomenal asset to our town, and I'm happy she's here, and I thank her.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
Okay.
Jen, do you have any closing words?
Do I have any closing words?
Yes.
Well, if anyone has any questions regarding the budget, feel free to reach out to myself or Ed. I think people are going to be pleased with the new presentation on the budget. I think there's a lot more detail, and I think it's going to hit on a lot of points that is addressed today. The perception that, you know, we are high taxed town, we're far from that. The perception of, you know, where our funds go, that we have a lot of you know, fluff. You're going to see the details per department. You're going to really see that it's pretty trim. So I think with the new presentation, I think I'm going to be optimistic and think the taxpayers are going to pass the 4%. I'm going to be optimistic.
Well, we don't know if we're going to get to that point, but that amount, we're going to see that. We don't know where it is yet. It's not finalized.
We don't know what it's going to be yet, but
Right. No, I agree, but I'm just saying, let's be optimistic.
yeah, we're optimistic. Yes, absolutely.
And if anyone wants to see that chart I put up with the tax rates, I've posted it on Facebook already on both under my name and as well as biggest state, smallest town, whatever Jay Messier's site is. I posted on those 2 locations on Facebook. So that's out there for everybody who wants to look at it. Jen, do you have any closing words that you'd like before we put this thing to bed?
Just thank you for everybody who attended. And this was great. Thank you for spending the time with us.
Dr. Dixon, final words, and you can close this out.
Thank you. Thank you seems almost too lame for me to say, because I am greatly impressed with the amount of knowledge that we've been able to present. As I mentioned before, Director Mills has only been here 4 weeks with us, and we've already seen a great deal of information presented to the public. And those of you who are attending, please do tell your friends and neighbors that this program is being recorded, and that we certainly would like them to start to listen to it. Maybe while they're eating dinner or lunch, they could just tune it in and get a great deal of information in preparation for the budget. So thank you so much, Mr. Wazika, for putting it together. And I think that that's a wrap for this morning, isn't it?
I just let everybody know I am going to I'm going to upload this to YouTube as soon as we're done. It usually takes about a half hour or so to process the video and then upload it. So it will be available on YouTube for about 30 minutes to an hour.
Excellent.
It will be down there today. You can go view it. Everyone, ladies, thank you very much for joining us today.
Have
And
a
I
great
appreciate your
day.
time
Thank
on
you.
Saturday.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.